Well, one thing that isn't changed by what happened to Kiri Allen this week, or is happening to her this week, it doesn't get the country out of recession. It doesn't make it any easier for you to pay your mortgage. It doesn't make it any easier for the boss to keep running his business at a profit. We are, in case you didn't know, in a recession. I read social media posts that saying we're the only country in the South Pacific that is. But where are we going with that recession? And what impact does it have on real Kiwis' lives and I guess the well-being of the country as a whole? Well, for a good, independent and expert analysis of that, there is no one. Well, I'm just going to hold up. We may not have him. We got him. We got him on the line. We have. I think he's good to go. The person we go to get a good reading on the situation economy-wise is Cameron Bagrie from Bagrie Economics. And he joins us now. Cam, how are you?
Oh, good morning. She's pretty wet here up in Auckland.
Are you up in Auckland? Is the weather bad there?
She's pretty typical Auckland, but I came up in the Hawke's Bay yesterday and she's a little bit rough all round.
Yeah, pretty rough in Wellington this morning too, Cam. Well, Cam, you've written a column pointing out that, and I suppose with all this other stuff going on, people forget we are in recession. And a couple of things I wanted to run past you before we get into the column. Firstly, are we the only country in the South Pacific that is in recession? Are the Australians not in recession? I thought that everyone was going through this.
Well, everybody's on a slowing growth trajectory. But look, I would not characterise New Zealand as being in what's called a pure recession. Yes, we might be able to satisfy the technical definition, but the first quarter of the year, we sort of got knocked around by a one-off in the form of Cyclone Gabrielle. You know, I find it sort of hard to express the term or use the word recession when we've got an unemployment rate at 3.4% and we're seeing pretty turbocharged wage gains out there across the economy. So stepping aside from recession or not, what we know is that we're heading into what's called a reset. And I'm using that term reset intentionally because I guess if you look at the last 5, even 10 years, Sean, it's been abnormal. Interest rates down around zero, all the money printing, the government spending $65 billion in 3 years. That's not normal. Yeah. And what we're going back to is a more normal economic environment. Now, unfortunately, there's going to be a few bumps along the way because a lot of people have become conditioned to that abnormality, whereas normality is around the corner.
Right, and we're going to have to do some readjusting to that. Where does the pain of that reset, and we're not talking Klaus Schwab Great Reset here, I must remind people, where does the pain or the price of that reset fall?
Well, it's going to fall across the board, but I guess there's two different elements to the reset. There's the near term, and there's the near term cost of getting rid of inflation. Inflation's that thief that steals money out of people's pockets, and it's both economically and socially destructive. Now, in order to get rid of inflation, you've actually got to inflict a bit of economic harm to encourage people not to spend. And this is what happens, is that to tame inflation, interest rates go up, interest rates go down. Well, the property market struggles. People stop spending. People stop spending. Of course, then firms make less money. Then you start to see layoffs and unemployment moves up. Now, that's the basic dynamic in regard to how this thing is going to work. So there's going to be a bit of pain sharing all round. The other side, Sean, which is not talked about enough, is the structural side to the New Zealand economy. And what I'm seeing out there is that there is an economy that has an awful lot of inflicted structural damage over a number of years. And we can see this coming through a whole lot of indicators. The current account balance, which is our national chequebook with the rest of the world, is up in excess of $30 billion in the red. Your local authorities have got deficits of $1.6 to $1.7 billion in the last 12 months. So they're spending a lot more than what they're earning. So guess what? Rates bills are going to start to move up. Yeah. Educational achievement and attainment across this economy is an absolute national disgrace, and that is going to be an economic and a social problem 10 to 20 years down the track. Your law and order, rising crime is actually telling us about that mismatch between the economic and the social side of the ledger out there. the government accounts, well, when you go through economic, more difficult times, the real state of the government accounts comes to bear. And guess what? We're starting to see the tax take for a long way beyond expectations. And firms are not making the money they were in the last couple of years. So ideology, i.e. we can whack these firms with a whole lot of costs and it doesn't really make it. The difference is getting checked by economic reality, because costs go up, firms make less money, they cut costs, and guess what? Firms bigger costs. So there's a whole lot of changes that need to take place, both in a cyclical sense, but the more worrying one in my mind, Sean, is the structural damage to this economy and what it's going to take to get us back on track over the next few years.
Does it take a rejig of income tax brackets? Because that is becoming, in the election and the run-up to the election, a pretty hot issue. Is that one of our major problems, or is that a sidebar?
I think that's a sidebar. Look, we'll offer some sort of tax relief, yes, but if I look at, we've got bigger problems here across education, health, infrastructure. I just drove across yesterday from Hawke's Bay up to Auckland, and it's pothole central.
Yeah.
And this is a story across New Zealand. We've got some major problems across infrastructure within New Zealand, and that's going to come with a kicker in a few years' time in regard to productivity growth. So I guess the real challenge here, Sean, is that how the tax debate is expressed. And look, most people, yes, you want to have lower taxes. Part of the reason you want lower taxes is because there's a general mistrust in government in regard to spending your money and delivering value for money. If we could get that right, i.e., look, this money is going to get well spent, you're going to get value for money, we're going to do X, Y and Z with it, I don't think people will mind paying a little bit more in tax.
Cameron, I am absolutely loath, mate, to push you into political commentary, because I know that's not your thing. You're a guy who crunches numbers and does it very, very well. What do you make of a revenue minister walking away from the portfolio?
Shaking my head.
Yeah?
So that's the only way to describe it. Yeah, there's a principle of collective responsibility within Cabinet.
Yeah.
You might not agree with all the decisions, but excuse my language, you got to suck it up. And what we're seeing within this Cabinet or this government of today is actually reflective of what we're seeing across broader society. What we're seeing across broader society is a lot of division. What we're seeing internationally is that rules is being challenged by what's called a power-based narrative. This is America versus China, this is Ukraine versus Russia, etc., etc., etc. But if you ever look at what we're seeing within both the political scene in New Zealand, but within general society, people are challenging rules. People don't want to live by the rules. And some of this sort of stuff is starting at the top, Sean, in regard to where we see...
And it's kind of... I think you're not talking politics, you're talking human behaviours. And I hadn't quite seen... Parker's not playing by the odd rule that you put up sometimes with things you don't agree with for the greater good or to move the ball up the field. And he has kind of abandoned that, hasn't he? Particularly, I'd say, doing it at a time when he knew the boss was really under the pump with the Kiri Allen stuff. To throw his spanner in the works, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, well, if you think about, if you want society to obey by the rules, and sometimes we don't always agree by the rules, so some stuff needs to get challenged, then this sort of stuff starts at the top. And what we're seeing out there at the moment is at the very top is struggling to play by the rules. But this is why it's a global theme, Sean, and what we're starting to see is that power is starting to challenge rules. And it's one of the big tectonic shifts that MFAT identified within their navigating a shifting world environment in regard to how we need to interact with our various neighbours, trading partners. But we're seeing semblance of this sort of stuff on the ground within New Zealand. And if the top of the chain is not sort of obeying by the rules and there's a whole lot of frictions...
Then you get chaos, man.
Well, this is where it filters down through general society.
Yeah. Hey, Cameron, that's a very good observation. But and let's just get back to, you say the technical recession. You're expecting more people out of work, more people, on the benefit, relying on those who are paying tax to get them through.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'd like to say there's a better prescription for getting rid of inflation than beating the economy up. But the one that's potentially available, I don't think we're going to pull.
And what's that?
There's two ways to get rid of it. You beat the economy up, which means that if you look at the forecast across the bank economists, the Reserve Bank, the Treasury, everybody's saying unemployment's going to 4.5% to 5.5%, which basically means the number of people on a benefit is going to go from 354,000 as of a couple of weeks ago to something up in excess of 400,000, which is a big economic and going to be a social problem. If you've got a mismatch between demand and supply, i.e. too much money chasing too few goods, you either bludgeon demand, which is not great for employment prospects, or you boost supply. And what does that look like in practice? It means working hell for leather to make sure your economy has got an expanded anaerobic threshold to grow without generating inflation. And this is where you look at your education system. This is where you look at migration settings. You look at welfare dependency. Yeah, you look at making sure people have got the right skills. Now, these are levers that take time to actually deliver outcomes on the other side.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty simple equation. Yeah, if we want to minimise the economic and the social damage that taming inflation is going to bring to this economy, one of the ways we need to do it is that we focus on the supply side of the economy and giving less scope for the Reserve Bank to need to beat up the demand side.
Right, I hear you. Look, one just last thing, because we've been looking at this specific issue, ACT's policy on toll roads. Toll roads in economic theory, good thing, bad thing. Cameron?
The user pays works in certain instances.
I'll let you get away with that, Cam. Hey, thank you so much. Really interesting conversation this morning. Take care in Auckland. That is Cameron Bagrie, independent economist, Bagrie Economics. And I know you got to listen carefully. Economists are a different type of person. But you heard it. He said we're in all sorts of trouble and we got long-term. The problem to me is when he talks about our education standards and our health standards, we are creating problems 20, 30 years down the track.